There we go. Perfect. So I'm a project manager to SoCal Gas, also the president of SHPE Los Angeles. A little bit about myself. Mechanical engineering graduate program as far as Cal State Northridge. Been on the board several times. Won't go into too much detail, but I do want to share a little bit of background about myself. I am diagnosed with ADHD and I'm dyslexic. The only reason I share that and I put these pictures on here is just for the support and the solidarity for mental awareness and for mental health awareness. And these are all different activities that have contributed to my success and keeping myself focused. So a little bit of background there. What is corporate fundraising? What I'm going to focus on today is specifically on sponsorships and the idea of fundraising dollars and getting this money from corporations. There's many different forms of sponsorships and supports, but we're going to be very specific with the actual fundraising portion of it and what makes someone a sponsor. One thing to consider is that it's not an exact science. This is a little tricky for us engineers, and I understand this because sometimes we're of the mindset of 2 + 2 = 4. Well, when it comes to managing corporations, managing sponsorships, it is very much an art. There's all these things that I'm going to cover. I won't go into too much detail for the sake of time because I know each of these areas can be a good 15-20 minute presentation in and of itself. So I'll be available for questions, but I also want to share that if any chapters want any additional details or information, I'll be more than happy to share afterwards or with your respective chapters, just because we've learned so much through our experiences that might be too much to share now, but I'm just going to highlight on our lessons learned and our outcomes of what that was. Types of sponsorship. So we know that there's many different types of sponsorships available. There's in-kind, cause, donations, employee workplace giving. But I do want to say something very specific. What we're talking about today in regards to what makes a sponsor is someone that you're actually receiving funding from. There's a difference between someone you are collaborating with, someone you're partnering up with, and someone or a company that you're receiving dollars from that make them a sponsor. So that's the different forms of it. I'll give you guys an example of those differences. A sponsor is someone that, if you look on our SHPE LA website, we have a list of sponsors. Those are companies that we actually have an agreement with, and we've actually received dollars. So we're in our bank account, we have dollars from these companies, and we have set up an agreement and pretty much a contract to say, hey, if we give this amount of money from you, this is what we're going to be doing. Very specific with what our sponsors are, not necessarily our partners or our collaborators. Case in point, we have a great relationship with JPL. Our VP of IT, Luis Dominguez, works at JPL, has had great success there, and we collaborate with them and we partner with them. We've actually had some GBMs at JPL. They are not our sponsors. They are our partners. Now, we've made it very specific. Why? Because we don't want to dilute the value of our sponsor, right? At the end of the day is, what is our sponsor getting for the amount that they're giving us? And people talk, and we have friends in different companies. So I'll give you another example. If I'm company X and there is a company Y, and company Y is being recognized by a chapter through marketing, through promotion, they're being called a sponsor, well, fine. But then they come up to me and say, hey, here's our sponsorship package, for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, this is what we'll give you. I'm going to be, hey, well, why am I going to have to pay $4,000 or $5,000 for this when I just saw company Y get everything that you're telling me for free? They do not have an agreement with you. They're not providing funding. So just be very much aware of this, right? It's a whole approach of, if you're giving away the milk for free, why is someone going to buy the cow? Determining value proposition. Here's another big one that this ties into your actual mission and vision of your chapter. In essence, what are you going to be able to provide? What are you going to be able to provide these sponsors? What value do you give them? In essence, if you're going to be receiving these funds, what are you going to give them in return? Is it marketing? Is it promotion? Is it awareness? Then you tell them what you're going to do, right? In our cases, we give scholarships. We're going to give scholarships to students, to professionals. Professional development, we send our members to conferences. Fortunately for us, when our EBOR went to NELA, that was covered by SHPE Los Angeles. We send a lot of our professional members to conferences and we pay for that. We have, fortunately, the funds to do that. And these funds are generated because of our sponsors. So we give the recognition to our sponsors for allowing us to do this. Researching the corporation, this is an area that requires great expertise because you need to know who you're going to and why. For example, are they a SHPE IPC member? Navigating that is very tricky. Who's your gatekeeper? Is it a charitable budget, et cetera, et cetera? Why do we want to know this? Well, it has a lot to do with the support that we're getting. And realistically, for example, we as SHPE Los Angeles, we frankly stayed away from IPC members. Not that we wouldn't help them or support them or work with them, but we know that was a little bit trickier to navigate on a financial side. So what we did is we actually researched companies in our area that had funds available. And how do we research them? Through our members and through our relationship with our members and our past companies that we worked with. We knew that the certain companies that we reached out to had funds available. They literally told us, we have X amount of dollars that we want to give to our community. We're looking for a chapter to partner up with, right? A lot of that had to do with our relationships, with our building, which I'll get into that. But it's because of that information and that research that we knew who to talk to and when to approach them about those funds that had available. It wasn't just generic, it was very strategic. Also, let's work on a win-win to this approach. That's in essence what you want to do is you want funds and you want to create this package to retain these funds. But what are you giving them, right? You want to make sure that you understand, and part of your research is what do they want? What do they want to offer? What do they want to give? How does this work? The best way to approach that is to do a little, like we said before, to do a little bit of research, because what happens is, in my past, people have asked, oh, what's a great package? And what's a great, how do you introduce them? How do you give them this package? Well, the truth is we don't even start with giving them a package. We really start this relationship to find out from them, what is it that they're going to want from us? If they have money and they were to have specific areas of where they want to give these funds to, it makes sense for us to find that out so we can approach them in that aspect and be like, we already know that this and this and this is what you want to do. This is what we have to offer you in regards to what their interest is. The other part is going into relationship building. This is the biggest portion of that art. Developing the relationship with these corporations is incredibly important. It's even more important on a professional level because of the exposure that we have and who we're working with. And I say that because sometimes these relationships that we're building with the companies, our own members work there. So we need to keep into consideration that we want to look good for these companies and on behalf of an organization. But we also need to look good because our own members are working there and they know that our members belong to this organization. So in essence, we have a reputation to uphold across the board, and we need to develop these relationships. And sometimes it's a short relationship to get it going, and in some cases it could be lengthy. I'll give you an example. We secured funds from a very large organization or large corporation this year. And we're very thankful for that. It was in the amount of $20,000 for an annual sponsorship that will be ongoing, which is a great relationship to have. Now, I'm going to be very candid with all of you. It took 4 years to develop this. It took 4 years of relationship, of work to solidify these funds. It started 4 years ago with them having curiosities, to them having an interest, to this company becoming a partner, a collaborator. And once they partnered and collaborated with us and saw the value that we had to offer, which basically provided a validity to it, then they were able to give these funds to us. But you can see that this was a 4-year relationship. So there's some strategic planning on a professional level, because the executive board that started this conversation 4 years ago, today when we secured these funds, nobody is on the board today that started the relationship 4 years ago. So that's something to consider in developing this. The other aspect is managing this relationship with these companies. Let me check the time just to make sure. Sorry about that. Okay. The other portion of that is going into the aspect of monitoring this relationship. Something that came up in our experiences with SHPE LA is that in these 4 years that we were developing this relationship, keep in mind that this was effort, communication, and discussions. There's many times where this could have failed where we could have lost this relationship, because what ended up happening is we as a chapter were communicating with them. We had a point of contact. We had our meetings in place. We were supporting them. They were supporting us. We were working really, really well together. Unfortunately, other people or other entities came into the mix. And we're only one chapter. There's other chapters in the Southern California area. There's the region, and then there's national. And what happens is sometimes we're not always aware of the different conversations that different people are having. And frankly, they came to us and said, hey, what's going on? We've been developing this great relationship with you, but now we have different people approaching us for different things. Fortunately for us, we've had experiences with this, so we mitigated this fairly well. It wasn't easy, but it took a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, basically to explain what was going on and let them know that it was not because we weren't being transparent. In some cases, we didn't know the information, and in some cases, we were notified, but nonetheless, we worked through it really well and able to establish this. But, just to keep it into perspective of some companies can offer you money right away. Some it's going to take a little longer. Some companies are going to be like, great, let's make this happen. Others are going to be like, well, let me wait a year to see what you all are about and how this irons out. Corporate wants. Okay, the other aspect to this is basically what the corporation wants from you. In some cases, it's brand visibility, recognition, different areas, and you got to find out what this is. In some cases, you may not know what this is, and you'll find this out in the relationship building. I'll give you another example. Right now, we have a sponsor. SoCal Gas is one of our sponsors. Again, for the past 3 years, they were only our partners. We were only collaborating with them. We didn't actually have an agreement with them. What ended up happening is even though I worked for SoCal Gas, and this is a testament, I didn't even myself understand what their needs were. We were approaching them from the aspect of like, hey, we're going to give all these scholarships. We're going to give these scholarships. We want all these funds to be able to help the students, Well, after having several meetings with them, what ended up happening is that SoCal Gas has a large budget for scholarships. They are going to give their own scholarship fund. So after several conversations, we're like, look, we don't want to work with an organization that's going to give scholarship dollars, not because we're not supportive, but SoCal Gas already has a large budget for scholarships. We do well with scholarships. So we needed to pull back and re-strategize and adjust it and work with them in the sense of what they wanted. So we had to remove these scholarship opportunities and give them something that was of interest to them. In this case was exposure on renewable energy and presentations that were around renewable energy. So therefore we were able to strategize after figuring out what they wanted. But it's an example of sometimes your approach may not land because it's not of the ears of what they want to hear, and that needs to be worked out.
Okay.
Pitch like a,
Thank
sorry,
you.
was somebody saying something? Okay. Pitch like a pro, another area that I will be honest with you, I'm not an expert at this, and I wasn't when I started with LA. We had some great executive board members that did a much better job of pitching. They were the ones that led this effort. They worked with the companies. They sat at their meetings. They had, they had some coffee dates with them. We followed up. If anything, they were our mentors to teach us how to do this. What I know today and what I'm sharing today is because of the shared knowledge that I received from our more senior leadership when SHPE LA got started as a chapter that it is today a couple of years ago. So this is an area that most certainly has to be developed. And again, at a later time, I can most certainly give, the do's and don'ts and the approaches on how to pitch like a pro. Sponsorship package. So this is one that I put up here. This is one of our templates that SHPE LA uses. You can't see probably all the details. I can certainly go into the details, but what you have here is kind of a three-part system. The first part is an introduction about what SHPE Los Angeles is, what we have to offer. The middle portion is our different tiers, the different packages of how a company can become our sponsor, right? One thing to consider is what we put here is very tailored and very specific for two things. What we want from our corporate sponsor, but more importantly, what we SHPE LA are able to deliver. This goes hand in hand with our mission and vision, and also what we have the capabilities to do. Our entire executive board needs to be on the same page with this. This is not just the president, this is not just the treasurer. We all have to come together and say, hey, if these companies give us these dollars are we in agreement that we can fulfill everything that this has to offer? Because this is a binding contract. This is an agreement that establishes who are and aren't our sponsors. Lastly, you can see my signatures there. I personally like to sign these because it makes a personal connection when we offer these packages, but that is both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it ties it together, it makes it very real. The curse is that now my name is on this agreement. So for better or worse, I am tied to this. Now it's a responsibility that I'm willing to endure because of the support of our e-board and because of the processes and procedures that we put in place that gives me that level of confidence. Now we'll go to negotiations. Now I'll use this as an example again from SoCalGas because this is one of the ones that we did recently that we most certainly had to negotiate. I stated my package there earlier, I should say our package there earlier, but I'll go to the trend of what ended up happening. We tried to work with them for a couple of years. We did a lot of partnership activities, but they weren't ready to be a sponsor yet. But we still did collaborations, did some GBMs with them. When we finally presented the package, they reviewed it and they had some questions. We adjusted, we made some adjustments to it, and then we went back and as you can see, and I'll back up here, we have different many tiers. When we actually sent this package to this company, we eliminated all the tiers they weren't interested in. We found out how much money they had available to provide, and it was an X amount of dollars. So we removed everything above that. We already knew that they can't give us any more than what they had budgeted for. So there's no sense in providing additional funds when we knew that they couldn't provide that. So we're there. Now we provided this to them. They reviewed it and they said, hey, we do have these funds, but we don't necessarily need everything that you have to offer. They told us we don't need corporate, we don't need, what did they say? They didn't need tickets for the conference. So like we don't need tickets for the conference. We don't need membership. We have a budget for membership. What they wanted is exposure. They wanted marketing, and they wanted a renewable energy event. So that's how we tailored that package. We tailored it to what they wanted. Once we had an agreement, we brought it back to the executive board and said, hey, does this seem fair? For the amount of money that they're going to give us, is this a fair amount for what we have to offer? And can we offer it? We agreed that it was fair, that we can make those adjustments. We wrote out the agreement, signed it, sent it to them. It worked out, and we received the funds. So it was, some effort that went back and forth, but we need to be we need to be flexible to this negotiation and have the time to nurture this negotiation, right? And this is something that we certainly convey to our leadership, both at national, because we are a 501c3 from a national perspective. SHPE does not have their own 501c3. So we don't actually receive the checks directly. We work with national and we tell them, send the money to national. They manage the funds for us. They'll deduct the percentage and then we'll receive it. So, part of this negotiation is keeping our leadership involved. And this includes, national, and this also includes our regional leadership, because they need to be aware of who we're working with and why we're working with them and what we've negotiated, so that there's no surprises to that. And then lastly, coming towards the end, it's nurturing the relationships that we have to offer. Meeting your commitments is incredibly important, right? Both nurturing the relationship at the beginning and nurturing the relationship at the end. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. You always want to provide your things. You always want to under promise and over deliver. Make sure that you keep them informed. Whenever you have a meeting coming up, send them the flyer, let them know, maybe a certain tip is letting your sponsors know the event is coming up before you actually let your membership know. That's a huge plus, because like, hey, we're working on this, just wanted to give you the heads up. It makes the relationship very, very close, and it establishes that. One thing I will say about this relationship is, the whole idea of, with great power comes great responsibility. And there's so much to be said here, because we as a chapter are very fortunate because of our membership, because of past executive board. We're very thankful for everyone that has contributed to the success. It's not one person and it's not one executive board. It's been, 4 or 5 years of work. But with that comes a lot of responsibility. We have agreements in place that we need to uphold. And again, going into not too much details, but that can go in very many different directions. We need to make sure we maintain the relationship, that we keep them happy, that if something doesn't go well, we are going to have to answer to that. And that's a responsibility to uphold. We can do everything possible. SHPE can do everything correctly and do everything good by the sponsor. But if they hear something because of any other means, then it can hurt us. So that's, an expectation that we need to uphold, that, we need to work with all of our partners collectively, with the local chapters, with SHPE National, with our region, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because as a professional chapter now, and I'll stress this to all of you, you have an agreement. If you receive dollars from a corporation, it is a binding contract. It is an agreement. There is ramifications if you don't meet your end of the bargain, which is why it's important to delineate or to distinguish between who you're collaborating with, who you're partnering with, and also who your sponsors are, who are actually giving you funds. A couple of different examples, us with South Bay LA, we have a great relationship. We collaborate, we're collaborators. We share their events, they share our events. We're wonderful collaborators. There's no exchange of funds. Could that develop into something more in the future? Of course, but right now we're collaborators. Our sponsors are LADWP, SoCalGas, Stantec, and Cordova. We have agreements with them that we need to meet. And our partners, in some cases, have been like the JPL. JPL is one of our partners. We partner with Tetra Tech and different other companies that started up as partnerships and then evolved into a wonderful sponsorship agreement. And for the sake of time, I think I went through that quickly, but I touched on everything. I just want to make sure that I gave the opportunity at the end for further discussion, and Cindy's going to give a great presentation. I saw it. She's going to touch on areas that I may have quickly overlooked. But thank you, everyone, and I'll stick around for questions at the end of the presentation. And like I said, if any chapters wants me to go to further details at your executive board and share more information, I'm more than happy to share everything we've learned. There's no reason why other chapters needs to go through the trials and tribulations that SHPE has gone through in our past. Thank you.
Thank you, Milo. Hopefully everyone you saw in the chat that we're going to leave questions until the end. So we'll have Cindy go next, but make sure you send in any questions that you have in the chat. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. This is my first time also doing the Zoom thing, so paciencia. All right, so and kind of a little bit more detailed and building on Armando's presentation. So I am from ASU. I'm the current president there. My experience, I used to be the vice president external of SHPE ASU. I did raise $28,000 in fundraising. I collaborated with 13 sponsors, created 17 workshops, crowdfunded additionally, and I was in charge of a 3-person committee team. So my responsibilities as VPE was networking with professionals, hosting companies, and collaborating with other student organizations. I was in charge of RLDC National Convention and the NRP at the time, that's now the NCP. So in terms of networking, it's one of the biggest parts of your VPE responsibilities. I networked through the National Convention, RLDC, business organization at our school. I would invite them to work with other companies. And I would also network with the SHPE professional chapter. Our school also has an industry relations person in charge of the Fulton Schools of Engineering, and I had a really great relationship with her. If they had any big contract with any school that wanted more diversity in their company, they would direct them to me and other student organizations. And I will speak more about why this relationship was really, really good. Another thing, alumni. Alumni are like the best people to reach out to for sponsorships because they can vouch the value of the student chapter and why it's great. When meeting with a professional, remember to dress appropriately, even if it is virtual. Maintain a conversation. That was the hardest part for me because I was an introvert. So I would look up questions about like asking people where they're from, why were they going into engineering, like stuff like that. It was hard for me to speak, so I had to learn this through practice, and it comes slowly. Make sure to have an elevator pitch for yourself and your chapter. Why should they invest in you? And make sure to prepare before you go. And more importantly, I would always forget to do this, but talk about yourself. At the end of the day, these professionals want to know about you and what you're doing and what your aspirations are. I would do a lot of emailing. So when in May hit, I would always email all these companies to see if we could get potential sponsorships. Usually how the email would go is that I would say a greeting, hope you're doing well. I would state the purpose of the email. So I would introduce myself, the position, the chapter, and if I wanted a partnership or sponsorship. I would also tell them why they should even consider sponsoring. And one of my biggest pitches was we need to fundraise for our national convention. So that way we can give our students this opportunity to go to the national convention. I would always list 3 dates or times that worked for me and if it worked for them. And I would usually finish off with a farewell, and I would have a signature just to make things look a little bit professional. Corporate package. Make sure to have a corporate package ready. And I know when I started off, I was very afraid of sending off the corporate package as the first thing in the email, but it just depends on the person. If you've worked with them before, give them the corporate package. If they're completely new, give them the corporate package like in the second or first email. Sometimes I would get on calls and then tell them about the corporate package, and then they would be like, actually, we need to schedule another call because my team has to look at this. So it really depends on the person you're talking to. For the corporate package, make sure to have maybe SHPE history on there, awards. Make sure to have demographic and statistics from last year. Sponsorship levels should have their associated benefits and have an expense report. List everything that you guys purchase for your events so that way they can measure and see how much it takes to maintain a chapter. Usually have a farewell, reiterate the value and appreciation and why it's so important to donate to your chapter. Have executive board contact information on there. Maybe they want to contact the outreach directors or PRs in order to co-collaborate in an event. You never know. And SHPE ASU has to do sponsorships through a nonprofit. Most of these companies do want to give you money, but also want a paper stating they are giving to a nonprofit. So for us, it's through ASU Foundation, and they would do all that paperwork, the wires, the checks, and all that kind of stuff. So we also did crowdfunding through ASU Foundation. They had a system already in place, which was amazing. I just had to do the paperwork, request the interviews, and it was an executive board effort. I did not do this alone. I did it with the president, the treasurer, and a committee member helped me that became the treasurer the next year. So it is truly a group effort. We created videos explaining the need. We showed success stories from the last year, and then we showed success stories after the national convention. And we would do a lot of personal email and messages on social media as well. And we mostly reached out to our alumni because they're more than willing to give back to the community. When you're doing event logistics, make sure to settle on a date and time. And also something that was mentioned before, email them maybe 2 weeks before the event and tell them, hey, I just want to remind you, we have this event. It could be a tech talk. It could be talking about soft skills. So like elevator pitch, emotional intelligence, and it could be a personal topic as well. Adapting to COVID, being a first-gen student, it really just depends. And if you guys can think outside the box, that's even better. I know for our school, it provides a lot of resources. So we already have one-on-one resume reviews and mock interviews. Our members don't need that. They potentially maybe need something more one-on-one. And a lot of students, feedback I will always get is that students were tired after a full day of lecturing. And so they come to our general body meeting and they get lectured on again. So one-on-one interactive meetings were always the ones they were looking forward to the most. And something I would always make sure of, since I had to prepare for these conferences, I would make tracks. So all my events kind of had a theme that would lead up to building these skills for these conferences that I had to prepare our members for. So that's what I always took note of when I made the flyers. I made sure to advertise 2 weeks beforehand to just give people enough time to put that on their calendar. And usually I cut my events to 1 hour to not only just respect the time of the members, but also our guest speakers. I found also that if you want a successful workshop and have a 15-member average, maybe co-collaborating with other student organizations could help you in that sense. And companies love this because they get to reach as many members as possible. Negotiating benefits. So for sponsors, the people that give us money, we prioritize them in the fall. And for the spring semester, we do partnerships. People that don't give us monetary benefits, but they do maybe give us their volunteer hours. They volunteer for our outreach. That is completely fine. And maybe it could be like swag or food they could donate. But make sure to be strategic about your partnerships. I know before I became VPE, we did have a company take on our last general body meeting, and they told us like, we don't have money right now, but we have money later. And they did a fantastic job in the GBM. And so I contacted them and told them, I remember you guys. I remember the general body meeting. I really loved it. I would love you to come back as a sponsor. And they were just like, we would love to come back. And they were in California and they flew out for our general body meeting. So they the sponsorship right away. So build those relationships and build them over time, and start early. Usually cycles of donations start in May. So I reached out to people in May and already had the fall semester booked by July. So that's something I would recommend. Don't be afraid to say no when negotiating. I know I had a company reach out to me and they were like, we want 4 workshops for this amount of money. And I told them no, because it was unfair to our sponsors because they weren't giving us the correct amount for their respective amount of events. So that's totally okay. You guys are giving them a benefit. You guys have talented Hispanic leaders in your chapter. And that's you're giving them that pipeline and that advertisement and that opportunity to talk to these students about their company. Committees and teams are super, super valuable. I really liked helping my committee members learn about networking, learn about how to negotiate sponsorship offers. They would be on calls with me with the person or the professional, and we would talk together like, hey, let's brainstorm some ideas for this workshop. And usually I would pick the person based on their motivation or if it was their dream company, and that would work out really well. If you have committee members, they could also be potential candidates for a position. So that's what happened with me. One of my committee members did become the VPE of my position, and that was really nice that he got that experience to work with me. And if you want to build a good VPE, make sure your transition is smooth. Provide industry contacts lists. We have industry contact lists that range from years back. Yes, maybe some of those contacts don't work, but you never know. Like phone numbers may be old or emails, but you should still have that information cataloged. We also created a handbook talking about best practices and stuff like that. That was really essential. I remember telling the new VPE, like, if something happened to me and I was like run over by a bus, here's a handbook, literally with all my thoughts. Have a corporate package, work with the new VPE to maybe adjust anything that needs to be adjusted, and pass on past email threads. I found that like introducing oneself and like sending thank you letters was the hardest part because you don't know how to approach that. So if you have the past VPE send you some like past conversation, it helps you approach it better. And logistics, I know room reservations isn't a thing anymore. But I know for my school, it's pretty competitive to get room reservations. So post-COVID, get all that information out because I knew it took a little bit of investigating for me to kind of get my way around that. But other than that, that's it. If you guys have any questions, let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy. So if anyone has questions, please submit them. We don't currently have any questions. But if there's anything else that Cindy or Amanda, if you guys want to address, then you can do that. Okay, actually now we're getting some questions. Israel Jimenez asked, would you be willing to provide feedback on chapter sponsorship packages?
Yeah, for sure. I can provide.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I'll be more than happy to review it, and if they like, up to them if they want, the rest of the executive board to review it, such as our treasurer and our VP of External Affairs too.
Yeah.
Awesome. So next question, Juan Bajena asks, what are some key challenges and differences with virtual versus in-person events?
I can go first, and I would say that for SHIP Los Angeles, going from in-person to virtual has been a learning experience because most of our packages were set up for in-person events. We had already come to agreement that certain companies wanted to host events at their location, or they wanted to come to our location and host events, because there's a difference between, like, there's a certain networking event that professionals gravitate to when there's people, there's handshaking, there's food, there's drinks, that's the professional world in which they thrive. Granted, going into virtual was an adjustment for us where we had to circle back with our current sponsors, and that's currently what we're working through in the next couple of months. We're actually taking a step back, working with them and asking them, we can still hold the agreement of in person. Do you want to wait until the restrictions are lifted, or would you like for us to re-strategize and do something virtual? That's another negotiation that we're going to work through with the current sponsors. I think going virtual is a wonderful opportunity for students, in the sense that it gives them a greater bandwidth to provide. And let's just be honest, the virtual realm and working and navigating through this might be their forte, right? So from us as a professional chapter, we can probably provide more support to our students who can thrive in this virtual environment, whereas a professional chapter, we will still have virtual events, but we'll have to take a step back and address the needs of our members and our sponsors.
I think this would be a better question for my current VP, but from what when we were initially talking, I remember the GBMs were the most difficult part because companies have restrictions towards like WebEx or Zoom, and it's company policy. It's not our policy. So we do have to be flexible in that term. Daniel, feel free to
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. So one of the challenges that our chapter faces online is I forget the last person who was speaking, but they kind of hit the point with it, is that some companies don't want to do virtual events and they prefer that in person. So some things that I do is that when I talk to them on a call, I push their priority to spring to see if there's some type of restrictions that are going to be lifted. But if not, we try to just minimize as much as we can with the virtual online. And then something also that we do is for logistical reasons, about a week before an event, I always do a test run with sharing capabilities, kind of internet connection of the environment that you'll be in, just so that there's no problems that we run into when the actual meeting comes on. And then, like I said, obviously everyone is dealt with the same problem being in COVID right now. So obviously the corporate partners understand, but it's just trying to mimic as much as you can online. And kind of what Cindy said too, a lot of people don't like being on another Zoom call after, you know, an 8-hour day of either being at work or being a student. So I try to tailor most of my work to be conversations and not so much presentations. And I just think that's something that we focus on at SHPE ASU.
Thank you, Daniel. He said it better, so much better than I could have said it.
One thing I do want to add, and this is something for both students and professionals, is that I think one of the challenges is going to be valuing what a corporate sponsor is going forward, right? What is the value of a virtual event? How much does it cost? How much can you get for that, right? If you're transitioning from in-person, corporations have, okay, well, I give you X amount of dollars for an in-person event, for scholarships, for X, Y, and Z. You know, if you're going to develop a partnership in the world of virtual, that's something that we're learning, right? It's like we're doing the metrics, we're having conversations with companies, we're doing a lot of work to find out what the financial value is of a virtual event. If we have a virtual event with them, how much does it cost? How much can we get for them? What is a company willing to give us for that event?